I'll share the Did You Feel It screen. And the way I got this planned out, and you should all be able to see it right now, right?
Yes, sir.
Perfect, thank you. The way I'm going to do this is we're going to go through the presentation, and please bear with me, and afterwards we'll do a quick live demo of what the form looks like. I'll walk you through, and then we'll open it up for questions. I hope that's okay. All right, Dan, with your kind permission, can we get this party started?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna mute everybody. If I beat you to, unmute yourself, Oscar, and away we go.
All right. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight for the WinLink Did You Feel It presentation. This is an extremely exciting project, and we hope you'll have a fun time with us. I'll try to keep it under half an hour. Not going to make any promises, though, because I'm known to go over. But it is, in a lot of ways, a project that combines amateur radio and citizen science, and we hope it really helps everybody build that community resilience. And even if you don't live in earthquake country, maybe there are a couple of ideas in there that are applicable to hurricanes, tornadoes, and so on. So while we're going through this, think about it in terms of, open up your mind in terms of what this can be used as. Did You Feel It is one instance, but a very successful, exciting program. A little bit of background. I saw many of you are actually familiar with earthquakes, but let's just go over this. Did You Feel It is actually a program by the United States Geological Survey, also called USGS, and that's been around for quite a while. And as you can see here, some of you have lived in earthquake country, especially during Twitter time, when a big earthquake happens, pretty much Twitter, text, and so on comes alive with thousands of these messages that say, did you feel that? And then the other thing that in SoCal inevitably trends is hashtag San Andreas, even if it has nothing to do with San Andreas. But that's just one of those things you have to get used to. In 2019, we had the Ridgecrest earthquake sequence, and that was the first one we were actually, and this was a year ago now, July 4th. I was with a local amateur radio club at a event at a parade in South Pasadena, and we barely felt it because they had just begun to play the national anthem, and the band really got into it. So it took us a moment to realize what was going on. But then the day after, the M7.1, we definitely felt. And for those of you who've gone through this, you know what you do is you either duck, cover, hold on, or wherever you are, you just sit down and wait for it. And we had in our household advance notice of this earthquake because Tron happened to be on a conference call with the California Earthquake Authority at the time, and some of them were in Ridgecrest when the earthquake happened. So it was one of those things where we knew it was coming. We sat down and we started counting. And you count slowly, this 1, 2, 3, and if you get over 30, you know it's a bad earthquake. It's a big earthquake. And we got to 38, so we knew it was big. And one of the things that you do after an earthquake, you report, did you feel it? Because that helps with the intensity. And just to give you a size, order of magnitude, for the M6.4, there were 51,000 did you feel it reports collected by the USGS. And for the M7.1, 42,000. We kind of think that had to do with the fact that it was on a Friday night and people were probably partying and probably thought it was part of the party, but okay. Magnitude versus intensity, what's the difference? Magnitude measures essentially is a measure of the energy released by an earthquake, and it's a logarithmic scale. So for amateur radio operators, this is one of those things that you're very familiar with. Generally on the Richter scale, it's an increase of 10 times. So from 5 to 6, a magnitude 6 earthquake on Richter is 10 times larger than one on, and we should say moment magnitude, which is a modified Richter scale, is a 10 times larger on the scale. However, in terms of energy released, it's 32 times larger. And just let that sink in a little bit. 32 times larger is an enormous increase in energy released. Intensity, on the other hand, measures or describes the effects of an earthquake on the surface. So think about it in terms of what happens to, how do humans react to it, what happens to infrastructure, and so on. So the difference there is magnitude is a fixed value, right? The magnitude doesn't change, just like a 25-watt light bulb, right? The energy stays the same. And again, it measures the energy released, and it's an objective value measure. Intensity, on the other hand, varies, and it varies with the magnitude of the earthquake. Obviously, intensity will be different depending on how strong the earthquake is, with the distance you are from the hypocenter. So if you think about the epicenter being the surface expression of the center, the hypocenter is, in 3D at the center of the earthquake. And the geology. So if you're on very soft ground, you may experience an earthquake much more intensely than somebody who's on bedrock. It measures the impact on humans and structures, and it's subjective. But in a lot of ways, intensity is a great measure because it is actually observable by what's happening around you. And on the right there, for those of you who remember Northridge, this was actually a picture from Northridge. And when you see something like this, you can tell the intensity of this earthquake was pretty high. So this is one of those things to keep in mind. Of course, for those of us in emergency communications, intensity also describes something that is actionable. If things are really bad, you can describe that and hopefully get help to that particular area, especially when communications are compromised. It is measured on the modified Mercalli scale, and you can see it goes from not felt to weak, light, moderate, strong. When it's felt by all and many frightened and some heavy furniture begins to move, to violent, when you have considerable damage in protected structures or specifically designed structures, and then extreme, where you have the collapse of wooden structures, and most of us in SoCal live in wooden structures because of the earthquakes. And, so understand that this is a scale, once you get into the 8, 9, 10, you're in trouble, and your community is in trouble. So how can amateur radio help? I think it's the first question that comes to mind. If they have a web service for this, what can amateurs do? Well, number one is the donut challenge. And for those of you who've been involved in disasters before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The donut challenge means that information comes in kind of a donut shape. The hardest hit areas usually do not provide information because their communications are down, or people are busy picking their belongings and their families out of the rubble, or they have other issues. But usually it's a communications issue. To give you an example here, the Did You Feel It donut hole, and this is a chart from a map from the USGS. This was the recent earthquake 5.7 in Utah. Everything in black. They didn't have any information in the first hour of when that earthquake hit. And again, it was a 5.7. It's a decent sized earthquake, but imagine if this was a catastrophic earthquake and you don't get any information from the area that are hit. And it took them quite a while, up to 10 hours before those areas in black. Let me just turn on the pointer. There. Here are these areas where they didn't get any information until much later when it got filled in. And you can actually see the highest intensity areas didn't report any information when the earthquake occurred, or in the first hour after the earthquake. So keep that in mind as we go forward. This is the same for hurricanes. It's the same for tornadoes. It's the same. Once your infrastructure fires is compromised, how do you get the information for help? Rob Hansen of Ventura County Aries ACS, when I gave this presentation on Monday, pointed out that something very similar happened during the Whittier Narrows earthquake in LA. Los Angeles, in the communication infrastructure in downtown Los Angeles was still functioning, and they were calling for help because they got hit pretty bad. And they told all the other mutual aid fire departments, we need help. And the Whittier guys looked around and said, wow, it looks really bad here. I wonder what it looks like downtown. So they got up and they headed straight for downtown LA when they were the hardest hit area because there wasn't any communications coming in. So amateur radio operators can actually provide a valuable service to the community by pushing out a did you feel it report right after an event and describing what it looks like in their area. And if you think about it, relatively speaking, those are extremely valuable because we can fill in these black areas, black dots here, where they don't have any information. Amateur radio, of course, is a natural mesh, and a mesh is are nodes that are self-configuring and self-organizing. And that's what amateur radio is about. We already live in the affected areas. In most cases, you don't need to fly us in. So by providing this information, you get first-hand, on-the-ground information, quality information. We're path neutral. We generally don't care how we get the message out, whether it's on HF, VHF, UHF, mesh, fax, whatever you got, you can get that information out. If the internet's working, hey, use that, get the information out, make sure that the information gets to where it needs to go. And we're also trained in robust communications. So we have several paths available to us. So if one thing doesn't work, unlike many other organizations, we have 3-4 other things that we can turn to. Whether HF doesn't work, we can use VHF. VHF doesn't work, maybe we use mesh. Mesh doesn't work, we go back to HF. We have these options. And the other thing is we can provide high quality data. So one thing that we can do is provide not felt reports. At first glance, that seems kind of counterintuitive. Why would I report an earthquake in my area that I did not feel? For the USGS, that's really valuable information. Why? Because it helps them delineate the boundaries of that event, of that earthquake. So being a trained operator, an earthquake happens in your area, get a notification, say, I didn't feel that. You can get down, get down to your computer, to your radio station and actually send that and say, okay, it happened in my area, I didn't feel it, valuable scientific information. GPS coordinates, we can actually provide high quality granularity, meaning GPS coordinates, in our case, we can use degree decimal down to 4 decimals, which gives them 10 meters precision. That's a very, very precise location. And the other thing is USGS has to be, by charter and by law, concerned with personal identifiable information. And this is where being an amateur radio operator is actually an advantage because all the information we transmit is essentially public. We have to add our call signs to our transmissions, so that's a big plus. It can be based on our own personal observations, and the more of these did you feel it reports we fill out, the more we train this, the better these observations become. You have a comment section where you can add information and they actually read that, and that's very, very valuable. And finally, we can provide training and exercises to make sure that we provide this really high quality information. By and large, this is geared towards science. But you know how this works. At some point, you have a major earthquake, whether it's Cascadia Rising in Washington, whether it's in San Francisco, whether it's the San Andreas Fault, or another event. At some point, somebody will walk in after 48 hours and will say, okay, tell me where we're most needed, whether it's the military or FEMA and whatnot. And Oscar gave a couple of presentations which point that out. If you can have quality information already, because amateur radio operators are trained to provide it, you actually speed this process along. It's extremely valuable. How did this all start? Well, it all started when we reached out to the USGS and we said, hey, would this be useful to you? And it was after an earthquake that we didn't even feel, but would that be something that would be useful to you? And they came back to us and said, absolutely, let's talk. And so it was a Aries USGS WinLink collaboration that made all of this happen. On the right, you see a map of all the Did You Feel It reports in 2018 that came in through the web. But essentially, it happened that Aries groups from Southern California, Central California, Northern California, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Nevada, Hawaii, Puerto Rico and Mexico got together and said, let's make this happen. Of course, the WinLink development team was really enthusiastic about this, and Greg, KJ6SJT, stepped up and wrote the form in record time. He worked very closely with Vince Kitoriano from USGS. The two of them hit it off, and they worked hand in hand. So it was agency working really closely together with WinLink development team and Aries to make this happen. Mike N6KCB, who many of you know, of course, pushed the project along and was extremely instrumental in making sure it stays user-friendly. And then David Wald, the geophysicist in charge at USGS, was also very enthusiastic. And it took a lot of people to make this happen. And this is their story, if you will. Project phases. The initial phase, we reached out to USGS and the WinLink development team. They were all enthusiastically in favor. Was there a need for this? Absolutely. Was there willingness to work together? Absolutely, there was a willingness. And within a week, we had everybody in a Zoom, and we got the project off the ground. And that meant the hard work. And let's face it, Greg, KJ6SJT, did pretty much most of the heavy lifting together with Vince. The two of them worked together. They wrote the form. They made sure the JSON is correct and so on. And this was the big chunk that needed to get out of the way in the beginning. So the build happened with Greg and Vince and Mike getting it out almost within a week, had a prototype, and then we went into functional testing. And for us, functional testing means we have a small group of 3 to 5 people that just give it a couple of turns and see whether it works. So that was driven by Aries LAX, and we got back to Vince and Greg and ironed out some of the kinks, and there weren't a lot of them, but it worked really well. The next step, and if it comes along here, bear with me, there you go. Next step was the testing phase. So we recruited testers in what I dubbed the Aries Alliance, for lack of a better term. And we reached out along our network of trust. And those were people that I'd worked with before, Scott, NS7C up in Washington, our friends in Hawaii, Joe and Clem, of course, were part of this, Doug, N0DAJ in Arizona, who we always love to work with, our friends in San Diego. And Rob, K6RJF, he's been one of the biggest supporters of this. Of course, Dan up in San Joaquin Valley, and the whole crew up there, they all really rose to the occasion almost immediately and say, hey, let's do this. So thank you so much, everybody, for doing this. This was great. And then we solicited feedback. USGS, we wanted them to know the data fields that we feed you, are they being seen? And some things were sometimes as small as a capitalized C or lowercase c, but we could only get our handle on this once we tested it. And then, of course, there were the Aries ACS exercises, and I'll tell you a lot more about that in a moment. And that culminated in what we call a capstone exercise, the Gordo super event. And this is part of the story as well. So we're coming up on that in a second. And the general release was on July 5th, 2020. And with that, with the general release, we made it available to the 28,000 plus WinLink, active WinLink users. And this entire process started on May 20th. So in 6 weeks, we essentially put this out there, tested it, and kudos to everybody who's involved. If you think about it, we really didn't reinvent the wheel there. What we did is we leveraged the existing technologies, found the talent to produce the form, but WinLink as a platform already existed. We already had the users who were capable and understanding in how to use this and get the process up and running. So we put this all together and we applied it to a need that an agency had. And I think that's the truly fun thing. The WinLink Did You Feel It form, earthquake, did you feel it? As I said, here's the system. On the left-hand side, you can see the USGS version of the Did You Feel It, the felt report as they call it. And on the right-hand side, you see the WinLink version, and they're identical. It's the exact same output. Both of these systems essentially put out a JSON file, that's a data file that goes straight into the database. And so what you see here is the USGS web version and the WinLink version producing this data file. And that's the file that you can see when when we walk through the demonstration of it. And that has all the information that you feed it. A couple of things that are special here is at the bottom, let me get the pointer again. It automatically puts in your call sign, your base call sign. That's a big plus because in a lot of ways it tells you this information is coming from somebody that we can, verify. It's not some random person who's giving us some information. So it's a big, big plus. And then from there, it goes into the USGS database. And from there, the usual path is to the science community, where it then informs hazard mitigation, first responders. It feeds information to utilities, informs policies, etc. So this information is extremely valuable because the more observations there are, the more data we have, the better we can understand earthquakes. And of course, it also goes into these wonderful community internet intensity maps. And I'll show you a larger example in a little bit. This is an actual map of the Ridgecrest earthquake that you see at the bottom right here. And you can see the dark red spot right in the heart of it. That's where the earthquake was at its most intense. And a 7.1 earthquake in the Los Angeles basin, I tell you right now, would be catastrophic. You'd be picking us out of the rubble for quite a while. So just keep that in mind. So what's the big deal about this? Well, the big deal is for the first time, we actually have WinLink through user inputs create a database compliant output that then feeds directly into the USGS database. That's not been done before in that form, that you actually get by using this direct access to the database. And the USGS actually kindly set up an email address, and I'll show you what that looks like. So when you put this form in your outbox, it'll be already addressed to the USGS. All you need to do is find a path for the email to get to a WinLink connected gateway, whether that's on HF, VHF, mesh, even if you're internet. You can use this form via the internet, by the way, in lieu of the web form. And of course, there are implications for amateur radio. To us, that presents a couple of challenges and fun projects. Because how do we move the traffic out of area? If you have, let's say, direct access via HF, you can certainly send it yourself to one of the wonderful gateways like K6SDR, N0DAJ. I'm talking about Southern California here. And K000 in Las Vegas, or N5TW in Texas, and all the gateways that many of you provide and your organizations provide. Or you can actually train that with your friends and your teams and have them aggregated at one station. Let's say one person sends it via VARA FM to Andy, who let's say is our station in the center of the local response. Mary sends it via Arden, James sends it via Packet. They all send it to Andy, and he can then forward that, and we tested it. It will ingest it as a forward. As long as it comes from a WinLink account, the database will accept it. And then Andy can say, okay, listen, we'll preserve our circuit capacity, and I take care of forwarding the information to an out-of-area gateway. And that kind of frees the others up as well to get back to the local needs. And of course, if you've got VARA HF directly, Rob, for instance, maybe he sets up his system, he can send it directly to the out-of-area gateway, from where it goes to the internet and then to the USGS. And why does that matter? For the USGS, it matters a great deal because it improves the quality of the data. It's trained people, it's less biased samples of people who know what they're sending, and it fills gaps, especially during disasters. That's when they're flying blind, and that's when it's really important to get that information, that on-the-ground information. And by the way, that's important for all emergent, and USGS is not a first responder agencies, let me make that clear. But for a lot of emergency response agencies, that's really important because they very often don't get the information from these hardest hit areas. So did you feel it is an elegant way to practice also your windshield reports, your resource requests from those hardest hit areas? And we do encourage you to do that. For areas in amateur radio, why does it matter? We're protecting our communities by improving science. The better we understand our environment, the better we can defend it. We're collaborating productively with government agencies. And in this case, we work really, and again, it takes two to tango. They worked with us brilliantly. It was really, I mean, big kudos to the USGS. And it helps us train our operators to send quality data and use their equipment more effectively. And that's what we're really, what all of this is about. A couple of special features about the WinLink Did You Feel It is we actually have, and that's not available on the web, an exercise and real event button. And we talked to USGS and they can actually make that distinction in their database now. If you have an exercise, let's say like Shakeout or one of the local exercises, Cascadia Rising, or you want to set up an exercise where you train this, you can use the WinLink form to send to USGS and mark it as exercise. And let me point out with a pointer up here, there's the exercise radio button and it defaults to that. And if it's a real event, you can click on real event. You can also report past events. If you felt something during the Northridge earthquake, as long as you get the time and the date right, you can report that as a real event. We have the option to use the GPS function within WinLink, and that's a brilliant tool, and we do encourage everybody to learn how to use it, or maybe even get a USB dongle, a GPS dongle to plug that in. And you set that up very simply in your position report, and then it automatically fills in the latitude right here and the longitude. Those are optional, but we highly recommend that you fill in both your address and your latitude, longitude. Part of the added value that amateur radio can provide is a high granularity of this data. And by adding your address, you give them a way to double check. So this is one of the things that we strongly encourage you train your groups, you train with your groups to do. And finally, we have a JSON lock, another great feature within WinLink, where once this is all ready and you click the submit button, you cannot change the system, you cannot change the file anymore, the output file. If you made a mistake, you want to start over, you have to essentially close it and start over, but it provides an added level of confidence to the agency. And there we go. Exercises. That was the fun part. So we had all these groups from SoCal, Central California, Northern California, Arizona, Washington, and Hawaii. And we asked, would you guys run your own exercises? And they enthusiastically jumped on this. And it was absolutely brilliant. They conducted a lot of local exercises that were customized to their areas. The Washington guys, let me do a quick shout out to them. Most of them hadn't worked with us before, and it takes a little bit to actually do this, but they stepped up in a big way. They had fantastic exercises. So we had a KM6SO, for instance. Bob did a whole exercise regime where they went through each and every one of these steps. They identified some major issues with the date, for instance, and that became extremely helpful. We had KK6RJR from the Kern County areas. He and his group did a fantastic complete exercise package and gave us a lot of great feedback. The Arizona group with Doug N0 DAJ, they had their own system just put together. And Hawaii and of course San Diego really stepped up to the plate as well, and I'll show you that in a minute. But I have to say the San Joaquin crowd and Arizona, Washington, for some of them was the first time working with us in SoCal. Kudos to you. This was extremely productive, and I think we had a blast. So there were all these smaller exercises, kind of area driven, where people identified a date and a time and a magnitude, and then people built their exercises around that and gave us feedback on that, and it helped us a great deal. It helped USGS a great deal optimize the system. And here are the amateur radio contributors the Aries ACS groups that were involved. So you see, this isn't a small group of people. And if you think about it, in under 6 weeks to get that many people up and running and excited. So Aries LAX, the Auburn Area Emergency Communications Team with Scott, NS7C, Eastern Kern County Aries, Baja California, Mexico Radio Club, Hawaii Aries, big player in this, the Miro, Mercer Island Radio Operators, great contributors, same for North Bend Amateur Radio Emergency Services, PSE Aries, the Puget Sound Energy Amateur Radio Emergency Services, San Diego Amateur, but again, San Diego always steps up to the plate. I'll get to that in a minute. San Joaquin Valley did a fantastic job. Sacramento Valley contributed fantastically. Ventura County stepped up. Western Kern County and Yavapai County, those were the groups that were actively involved in making this happen. So it's a group effort if you think about it. And that led to our capstone exercise, the Gordo Super Event Exercise. And for those of you who lived in Southern California, you will notice that the seismology on duty is Kate Jones. So, by the way, Kate Hutton sent an email out the other day and said, "Oh, I heard rumors about this. Can I see what it looks like?" And so you're hitting the right tones when she comes back and she's really excited about this. But essentially, this was a completely unrealistic scenario. We decided to go with the San Andreas movie, which is terrible in terms of earthquakes, but as a visual, if you wanted to do that, you could watch that. But the point was we blow up the entire West Coast and everybody has the worst. And that way, we'll feed that information into the USGS just to see what happens. Have we really crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's? And so we usually do kind of a scenario that people can feel with it. We gave people an event date, as you can see here, and a time. And we asked everybody to submit their reports within 2 hours. The 2-hour window is extremely important because that's when the information is most crucial for USGS, getting that information out. And I have to say, we had 75 stations participate with only 24-hour notice, and 73 of them sending their information in that 2-hour window. So kudos to them for doing this. And they used 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, and a couple of them used mesh and telnet. So people were very creative in how this worked out. And this is, by the way, the map on the right-hand side that the USGS created for this particular exercise. They won't do this for every exercise, but because this was a capstone exercise and it tested their systems, that's what they did. And you can very clearly see these were the 60 stations from California that they put on this map. San Diego lit up like a Christmas tree. Kudos to San Diego and Rob for, just goes to show you, 24 hours, they were able to stand up 19 people like it's nothing. And that's really a well-prepared group right there. Of course, Los Angeles had a big response with 10 million people, but we're also around 19, 20 people. So, and then of course, the whole San Joaquin Valley, you see some people in Ridgecrest who participated all the way up to San Francisco. So it was an extremely successful event. And it also showed you, again, the Washington groups, Hawaii groups, and I'll show you the map in a second. They stood up within 24 hours without any problem. And that shows you how well prepared they are. Because if you can get that many people together for an exercise quickly, they're prepared. Here you can see what we talked about, the time since the earthquake, and you can see this steep incline here on the left. Most people reporting within the first 60 minutes, and then within 90 minutes, pretty much everybody had sent in their reports in 120 minutes. And this is what's so extremely valuable about the amateur radio community being able to do this. And here's an intensity versus distance plot. You can see that at every one of these community maps. And then live imitated an exercise. As the exercise was going on, there was a fern forest earthquake in Hawaii. And what the amateurs there decided was to, one, do the exercise and then pivot and use that real event button and submit that event, the 4.3 earthquake in Fern Forest, as a real event to USGS. And USGS is working on a white paper right now with us, and they were excited about this. extremely excited. So kudos to Clem and Joe for getting everybody involved, because a dozen of them, and this was all within the testing phase, went out and actually provided on the ground data on a real earthquake. So this is super exciting. It proves that it works. They used the form on WinLink, and I think it gets everybody really excited, because we told USGS this would work, and they proved that it would work on a real event, as luck would have it. And from USGS's point of view, they were really stoked for two reasons. One, it's a potentially unbiased sample as far as they're concerned, trained operators. And the other one is quite a few of them actually followed the idea that they reported not felt, which is really valuable to them. And it, with one fell swoop, Hawaii stepped up and just, you know, took it to the finish and said, yep, it does work. And by the way, the map here on the right is from that USGS white paper directly. So here's the question: what can you do as an operator? You can learn to use forms, including the WinLink Did You Feel It form. That's one of the many forms that are available. And it's great practice to learn for voice as well. What we found is people are very good at doing these forms on WinLink tend to be extremely good at doing this on voice too. It also helps you to learn ICS and Higgs forms and how that works as you go. But it's extremely important to understand how forms are transmitted. You can sign up for the USGS Earthquake Notification System, ENS, and get a notification whenever there is an earthquake. And we may want to have a discussion about whether we can enable something like that going the other way on WinLink. But that way you can also submit not felt reports. And sometimes you get that notification, you know, you actually can enter the code for that particular earthquake you're reporting on, especially if a lot of earthquakes coming after. And practice makes perfect. We encourage everybody to practice as often as they can. And on a little side note, the forum is now making its way around the globe, all the way from Australia, that's the one with the kangaroos, to Austria, the one with the Alps, and anything in between. So understand there's a lot of excitement about this, because amateur radio really does fill an important role in this. We do have more options available than any other communication service out there in sending this traffic. And the other thing, and to me, that's always the most important part of amateur radio, we have the operators like yourselves. Without the operators, none of this would be possible. So please understand it's your observations. You're using a fantastic tool in WinLink. You're using the bands that we've been allocated to do this. And every time you send one of these Did You Feel It reports to a federal agency, you're making a statement. You're saying, I'm here to serve my community, I'm here to serve my country, and I'm here to serve in a capacity of a citizen scientist. Here are a couple of additional resources, and I will give that, I will post that later on as well, if you want to learn more about earthquake intensity and so on. And there are a couple of future plans. One of them is an intensity feedback. On the wet form, you get a feedback after you submit it, which tells you what intensity you just reported. And Greg has already come up with a solution for this, with a working with Vince, which will use the same algorithm they use on that form on the web. So it's very exciting. We're working on a Spanish language version, because we want to, again, this is global. 28,000 WinLink users are distributed all over the planet. And what if you're traveling? What if you're in Italy? And at some point, yes, we will be able to travel again. You're in Italy, there's a major earthquake like the L'Aquila earthquake, and you have your computer with you. Bam, pop one of these out to the USGS. Give them on the ground information. How powerful of a message are you sending as an amateur radio operator when you can do that? Shakeout is coming up, and we do encourage all of your groups to participate in Shakeout. You don't have to be a local or earthquake country group to participate. Make it part of your emergency preparedness. You know, ask yourselves, can we deploy for 72 hours? Make that part of the fun of it. And you have that exercise option. Who else has that? And USGS is very excited about the exercise, because it gives them a chance to test their data with user-provided feedback. And training, 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 that's what this is all about. We want you to train, we want you to have success, and we want you to have a lot of fun with this. And that is so far, as far as I'm concerned, the slide portion of this. And I'm in the 30-minute mark. So if it's okay, I would like to walk you through how to fill out the form live. Is that okay, Dan? Are
Yes.
there any
Yes.
objections?
Go for it.
Okay, so let me share my full screen here. Yeah, get the mouse over. Whiteboard, advanced, here we go. Somehow I don't have the option to do the whole thing, do I? Bear with me, it can only be a matter of hours. Okay. We may have to do that in 2 shares because for whatever reason I can't share my entire screen. I can only share tabs in this version. Okay, no worries. Okay, can you see the, let's see. Yeah, you can only see this, right? The WinLink Express.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the new message? Yes.
Yes.
All right. And you select new message, you click on select template. Your standard templates should be version 1.0, 124 or higher. The latest version is 125. And then you go down and you have the USGS folder that's brand new. And you double click on the USGS Did You Feel It form. Or you can click once and then click select. That has the same effect. There you go. But right now you cannot see the form, is that correct?
No, we see the message.
Okay, so hold on. Let me stop the share and show you the form. This is, I don't know why it doesn't let me do the desktop. Oh well.
It opens it up in a browser.
Yeah, it does, but usually I can share the entire desktop so you see everything, but all right, there you go. So this is what the form looks like, right? Earthquake, did you feel it? There's a little what is did you feel it info tab. And by the way, for those groups that participated, all you are listed in here as a small thank you to all the great work that you've done. Let's say this is an exercise. Did you feel it? If I did feel it, I click yes, the date. If it's a historic, like Northridge, I can fill in the date there. But let's say it just happened right now. Let's say it was 20 minutes ago. I can change this here to 1820. Let's assume that. Click OK, that changes this. I can put in my address. And the nice thing is, as you can see, when you click on something and you had filled it in before, it'll allow you to just select that. The same here for the latitude, longitude. If you have a GPS dongle installed and turn it on in your position report, this will be auto-filled. I'm doing it manually here. And again, I just left mouse click on this and it fills in my location from the last time I filled this out. And remember, longitude in degree decimal in the Western Hemisphere is a negative number. So that has happened during exercises that people forgot to put in that negative number and it winds up somewhere in the middle of China. Probably not where you felt the earthquake. And then it's a questionnaire, just like the website. I'll go through that relatively quickly. What was your situation? Let's say I was inside a building. Were you asleep? No. So, let's say most felt it, was a bigger one. Was some mild shaking. I always get excited whenever there's an earthquake. And I dropped, covered, and held on. Was it difficult to stand or walk? Let's say no. There was slight swinging of doors. And for those of you who haven't experienced an earthquake, pretty much everything around you starts rattling. And it's like when a major truck is driving right past you. Did you hear creaking and noises? Yes. Some things rattled loudly. Did any of the pictures get knocked askew? Yes, but they did not fall. Let's say any furniture? Nope. heavy appliances affected. Let's say some contents fell out. Were any freestanding walls offended? No. But let's say here you got multiple choices. You can say, okay, there were a couple of cracks. There were cracks in the chimney. And here you can add additional comments. We encourage all amateur radio operators to actually put in how they sent it. Message sent via VARA FM 20, VARA, let's do VARA HF, 20 meters via N0DAJ. And you can put in other information like my pool was sloshing, the cat was scared, my bicycles fell over, anything that you might find useful. And you'd be surprised how much information people put in there. And then you can do submit. It'll ask you, do you want to complete the submission? You can click OK. Now I need to stop the share and bring you back to the other one. Yeah. All right, you can see the message now, right?
Can now, yes.
All right, perfect. So what you see up here is this is the official email address at the USGS. And we thought this would hold up the process, but actually kudos to USGS Information Technology Services. They came through really, really quickly on this. And we also encourage everybody to put in their local exercise coordinator or their local EC, anybody who's responsible. In our case, let's say our exercise coordinator is Jeff, W2JCL. I would add him to this so we have a record that it was sent. And then you post it to the outbox. A couple of things I want to point out. We picked exercise up here. Here's our address, the let long. And it fills in the call sign, your base call sign. You can't change that. And by the way, you cannot change anything about this form. It's completely locked. And that's an extremely powerful feature in WinLink. And we really, really like this. This is something that LA County requested when we did exercises because they don't want people to mess with some of their forms, especially the resource requests, once they're sent. And so this turned out to be a fantastic feature that was available in WinLink. And, you know, Phil did a fantastic job pointing this out. And, you know, a big thank you to the WinLink development team for making this tool available. It's absolutely brilliant. Post it to Outbox. And from here on out, it's just an amateur radio question, right? Do I want to send it via Telnet, Internet, or Packet WinLink, Pactor if you have that, Winmore, RDOP, if you absolutely have to, but if you have VARA HF available, it's a great choice, or VARA FM. If you want to get addicted to speed, that's the way to do it. Or if you have one of those Iridium Go's, you can send that because the file itself, and I want to show you this real quick, is not very large. This is, let me widen this. The size here is 753 bytes. It's under a kilobyte. That's not a large file. So we can send this via HF. And that was a big part of the conversation. We want you to be able to send this out. In fact, you could bundle 5, 6 of them from a sending station and then increase your circuit capacity by making one connection and sending this. So this is something that we thought down the line, and we do encourage all of you to have fun with this, explore with it. With the exercise button, you can't really go wrong. We think it's more fun if you do it in a group setting, but it's completely up to you. And with that, concludes the demonstration. One more thing, if you ever wanted to add the GPS, you can go to the position report. I don't have one hooked up right now. That's why I get the warning thing. But you can check the GPS serial port up here. In my case, last time was COM3, and you select the baud rate, and then it fills in all that information here on purpose, fills in all that information automatically, including updating your grid square, which is kind of nice if you're working in the field or your roving station for your next contest. And then you don't have to even post a report, you just close it and it's turned on. And then all the forms like the GPS position report form or the Did You Feel It forms that use GPS will automatically pull that information in. Great feature in WinLink. And with that, I'm open for questions, suggestions, anything like that. I'm gonna bring you guys over.
I'm going to ask everybody to use the hands up, to raise the hand. I'm going to try to limit it to 2 minutes, so everybody has a valuable time here. So take it away. I don't see hands here yet.
It's like my Monday night thing. I asked them, come on guys, you got to have questions. And they said, nope, we answered all the questions. So I do want to say again, a big thank you to our friends in San Diego who did a phenomenal job and, you know, are an inspiration to us here at LAX. Our friends in Arizona, Central Valley, you know, and, you know, Washington, Hawaii, it was fun. But okay, we got a couple of questions. I'll back off here.
Okay. Yeah, Marty, looks like you might have been up first. Go ahead.
Oliver, awesome. Yeah, I've got a question for you. So the JSON file, and I deal with those where I work. So recently we've been involved in some sheltering activities and repatriation after an event, and we've been asked to help in identifying, like with Red Cross or other organizations that are supporting shelters. It sounds like to me you've opened the door for some opportunities there to use this same mechanism in the field when it comes to identifying where you might have disaster survivors that are in need of certain services. And what I mean is that, especially in hurricanes, they can't get to everybody at once, and they have a tendency to group together, and then once the support system gets in place, they'll go and support them. Well, identifying that location of a shelter is no different than would be identifying the location of an earthquake. Yeah, there you go. Right, exactly. Okay, so I'm very interested in maybe touching base with you to see how the gears in the clock work. So I'll be reaching out to you. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Marty.
Okay, let's go over here to Oscar. Oscar, take it away.
You're on mute, Oscar.
Yeah.
Thank you, Oliver. Excellent presentation as always, but it's really interesting. As a citizen science, and you know that I'm in the side of science, I hope that we can develop, or it can be developed and find out like a detector, not a qualitative measurement, or something that we can put on the station and what is measured on the buffer, like for example, the GPS coordinate to put the actual shaking of the event. And that will be more quantitative instead of qualitative, and then we have these stations also spread out all over, and probably in the impact zone where there's no seismographer or something like that. Can you find out, or can we work to find out if there's something available that it can be in the right price, I mean lower price, but it works well, that it can be added into the form? Because that would be really interesting for the U.S. Geological Survey, especially as Mark is thinking when nothing is there and there's a ham, and then they will get a report from the location, not only that it was felt and how strong was felt, something that it was measured. And that would be an interesting addition to the form. And especially if it's really bad, that probably communications are going to fail. And by doing it in HF or VHF, or whatever the modes of digital transfer, that would be quite interesting for the U.S. Geological Survey. Back to you, Oliver. Thank you again.
Well, I think it's a good point, and what you're pointing out here is also that this is the beginning of the conversation, and in our mind, putting the form out there is the beginning of the project. The next steps are education and outreach and training for amateur radio operators who are interested. For those of you who may be interested in actually going in that route and start to measure magnitude, the Raspberry Shake is one of those options. They start at $379, and they come recommended by IRIS, which is a large education consortium for seismology. And I'm happy to share some information with you on that. But this is one of those things that they deploy, for instance, around here in schools, and it's accessible via mesh, via web. It's Linux based, so if you have the skills, you could, for instance, write a algorithm or a couple of lines of code that can actually send that information out. They used to have this for amateur radio, believe it or not, as a seismometer that actually would alert on a certain frequency in SoCal. But yeah, I mean, there are options there. And again, I think the Raspberry Shake right now is probably the most cost-effective option for this kind of project. And you can look that up. If you talk to them as an educational institution, they'll probably do something on the price as well.
I put it in the link there, Oliver.
Okay, thank you so much.
It's in the chat.
Okay, Ken from Idaho, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. I just had a question about the data. Does the USGS do any kind of scrubbing of the data before they map it out? I mean, for example, the example you gave on missing the minus sign and longitude, would that be fixed or eliminated before it's posted? I mean, how does that work with the data verification, or if there is any data verification?
They do data verification. So what you don't see on the map, for instance, this is why adding your address is important. What you don't see on the map, and let me see whether I can pull this up here real quick. Yes, I can. Let me share this with you because it's a great question. This is the information we got in latitude, longitude from USGS, and they do scrub that data because some of it doesn't make any sense. This station for here, he was most definitely not in Pennsylvania when this happened. It's actually a Hawaii station. And this is one of the local stations here. And what happened there was the longitude was 0. So that places him in Algeria. By and large, I think about 70% of the stations were spot on with their information, but there's certainly room for improvement. And you can see Hawaii, for instance, they've got this down to an art form to do the location. The same for San Diego, Washington, they were all spot on, the clusters up here. But it is something that I think more training can certainly address. And dongles, I'm a big fan of them because they automate the process.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Oliver.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Kim, over in Hawaii, you want to take it away?
Clem, we can't.
Hello, Clem. KH7HU. Okay, well, we're waiting for him. Let's go to this guy's call sign XE2 N6 KZB. Oh,
that's Mike Burton.
Okay, the form that went out this morning has additional rule checking in it. Greg and I are constantly looking at that and adding additional rule checks, and I believe Greg put the extra ones in to help direct you towards minus, positive, and within the decimal degree range. As the form is used more and more, and we get feedback from the USGS, we'll continue to add rule checks as is necessary. That will help to begin to minimize the operator error. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Mike. All right, Clem, you had a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make the comment that thanks to Oliver and the coordination between Hawaii and Aries LAX, I want to thank Oliver for all the help. And being that Hawaii is also earthquake, especially on the Big Island called Hawaii, that's where I have my DEC for East Big Island that said, you know, you guys live in the earthquake zone area, and they were more than willing to participate. So that was great. We had people from Big Island and Oahu participating in that July 3rd exercise. But I want to thank Oliver for all the support and the help he's been giving us. Aloha.
And thank you, Clem, for all the great work you've been doing. I think in terms of a technology curve, Hawaii has moved at incredible speeds. And, you know, just standing up these exercises practically overnight takes a lot of organization and trust beforehand, and Hawaii has that in enormous amounts, and we rely on Hawaii a lot, like we do on our friends in San Diego and Washington. And it's just, the wonderful thing about this is it's about community. And I want to thank each and every one of you tonight for taking the time and, you know, being here. And we hope you start including these exercises in your system, because we have these very powerful tools. WinLink is extremely powerful, our bands are extremely powerful, and our operators are extremely capable. So, Marty, you had another comment, go ahead.
No, actually, Oliver, I have a question, and this has to do with your data storage. So if, for example, you were mentioning earlier about IA and PA, I'm familiar with those. So if, and your comment too about getting the information as quickly as possible and accurately to officials. And what I like to, first a question, and you can ponder this for a moment, is about storing the data for later retrieval analysis, because I see you're really just ready to bust loose with analytics on this thing. Like, like how many hams responded in a population of how many, and where were they? And if it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then the rest of them were all at work, we're hoping. The other thing I wanted to mention was that your data is being, all right, I asked the question, is your data being stored? Are you storing, like, all of this data that comes in is going to USGS? You or USGS, is someone storing this somewhere? In other words, could someone go back and run an analytics and say, okay, I want to know if any of the, what was the delay between reporting and the event? If you know where I'm going with this, yeah. So in other words, we're not trying to, you know, trying to brag here, but if the reporting is quick enough and or accurate enough, there's always those either in the legal world, the media world, or the information world that want to run those analytics and say, you know, these reports were all received within, I don't know, 2.5% or 5% were correct. And so is there storing it anywhere?
Well, there are 3 approaches. I mean, one, USGS has its own storage, obviously the database. 2, we encourage everybody to actually make it part of their exercises to CC their exercise coordinator or their ECs in their area, because it gives you that extra layer of data. It's good to have a local copy of the information. And secondly, in this case, you can actually see all the information on the WinLink message viewer. WinLink stores every message for 21 days. So it's extremely powerful to actually go in there and take a look at that data as well. So it is on the WinLink service for 21 days. And that's how I look at a lot of data as it's coming in, just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Well,
and
there is open data, government open data is where I'm going with this. So is it, you know, there is a executive mandate that some data be considered open data, like maybe flood data or traffic data. And I'm thinking that with the right phone call, someone's going to say, geez, come store it over here so we can get to it.
That might be an option. Again, we didn't even know any of this was possible 6 weeks ago. So,
well,
you know,
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Give us another 6 weeks.
Okay.
Oliver,
Well, we'll wait.
if I may answer that question about data access.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Tron Nguyen. I work for the Southern California Earthquake Center, and we work with the USGS quite a lot. And you're right, as the USGS, there is a mandate that all the data is made publicly available. So the information that's being sent directly to the USGS, they do have data archives that are available for anybody who is interested to query and request. I put in the chat the paper that came out recently by the USGS about the Did You Feel It? And there's a section on data access. So there are databases and data archives that are already being studied, but if you have a particular interest of data request or such, you could always ask for it too. So it would be interesting once we get enough data from ham radio operators participating to see you know, our response as a group. And I'm sure we're moving towards that direction very soon.
Right, because Thomas, Marty, because there, in some circumstances, you'd have a declared disaster, a state declared disaster, and it would be interesting to see if the decision on declaring that disaster federally could have been on the amount of data that was actually identified at the time. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
And that's why we're lucky to have a subject matter expert. And Mike, you had a comment. Go ahead.
The WinLink servers maintain traffic for 21 days after it's been delivered. If you go to the message manager, and if it's a US call sign, you're going to message manager, you can go in there and go to search by subject and put in DYFI, and you'll get all those forms based on how many you're willing to show on your screen. I believe the default starts at 100. All the JSON files can be extrapolated by anybody. Yes, the information is primarily for the USGS. They're getting information now from this methodology, and they get the information from their web service. Their web service form is identical to this form, identical. So, and remember, they have clearly told us that their time frame is within 2 hours. They have said they are not a response agency. Their information is public, and other agencies use it, but they are not a response agency. And let's face it, myself having been in some major earthquakes in the public safety arena, after a major earthquake, no one is probably going to do this for them until they check their family, made sure they're good to go, and then they get around to doing it. So it's an after the fact entry to gain additional data as opposed to just their web service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. All right. Dan, WL7COO, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I haven't done any honest work since July of 2011, but we used to have to spend obscene amounts of money archiving stuff that's retrievable for us for a retention period of 5 years. And I'm trying to remember, I actually have no memory of where it went off to after that, but just like every piece of paper in the government, it's getting stored someplace. And there are just trillions of terabytes of data going someplace. So every Department of Interior agency, at least as of 2011, had to have online availability or near real-time online availability for a 5-year retention cycle. And of course, it wasn't for anything as useful as science. It was because of legal requirements for Freedom of Information Acts, but it serves one and the same purpose. Just thought I mentioned that. And I was a little confused when you mentioned the 10-meter precision available. What's the source of that? Because now that they put the military, I keep forgetting the acronym, military grid square system into WinLink, theoretically, there's a 1 square meter resolution capability if your GPS is that good.
Well, that came out of the discussion with USGS, and for decimal points on the degree decimal turns out to be 10 meters. 3 is 100. 2 is 1,000. So the 4 was a good reasonable number, and it's something that, and I don't have my phone with me, but everybody can actually get that information from their phone these days, either on Android, on your Google Maps, or on Apple. Apple Maps will give you that kind of precision, even if you don't have internet. So keep that in mind. Everybody on this call right now could get that information. So that's where that's coming from.
Phil just answered that question in chat about the precision of civilian GPS receivers. Okay, thanks.
And Lloyd had a question about a way to enter the GPS info. Absolutely, there is now, and let me share this, and that's going to be the last comment. There is now a wonderful position report, and I hope you can all see this, right? So you can actually enter information up here in degree decimals, and it'll actually convert it for you down here in degrees decimal minutes. It'll give you a grid square, and the same thing with the military grid square. And by the way, the position report I showed you earlier, Phil updated to be absolutely brilliant. You can enter pretty much any format and it'll translate it for you. So this is an ongoing conversation, and location is important. And we do encourage everybody to practice with this, because one of the things I remember from Oscar's talks is that one of the first things they did was to put up a map and start locating where people were and where the hardest hits area were, where you couldn't get through. And that's extremely valuable in any local, regional, or hopefully never national disaster or event. All right, unless no elevation. Yeah, you could do we can work on that. All right. I like that, Marty.
No problem.
All right. Unless any final questions, I'm ready to call it for today. I would like to thank you again one more time for spending your evening with us. And please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. My call sign, K6OLI at awrl.net. And we look forward to working with you. And if you want to have any of our files, the exercise files, the scenario files, and so on, we're happy to share that. And you can use it for local training if you'd like. And we're happy to share our training as well. So thank you so much for your attention. And, stay safe, stay healthy in this environment. And I'll talk to you soon. Dan, with that, I hope it's okay if I leave the meeting.
It is, but I got a question for you.
Okay.
And that is, can you send me, depending upon the size, at least a link to your file so I can get it out there to everybody?
Absolutely. I'll send you the slide deck if you'd like, and the information as a separate thing, and then you can send that out. And again, thank you so much, Dan, for making all of this possible. We really, really appreciate this.
Well, I appreciate you guys, and everybody is involved in this kind of stuff. This makes amateur radio as far as I'm concerned, what we're doing and the fun of doing it. Okay, I got that, and I'm hoping that at some stage, we're in our early stages of this, we'll work on similar things for tornadoes and other kinds of disasters so that we can expand this out. But what you guys are doing is great. Idaho, hey, now we got earthquakes there, so, whatever. Is there any more questions? Any more handhelds? No. Okay, Oliver, thank you much. I'll let you bail out. All right, and then Marty, no, he's just unmuted himself. All right, is there anything else here, folks? If you click into the comments in the chat area and do Control-A, it will highlight the whole thing, and then you just do Control-C to copy it, and you can paste it into what you want. I'll try to. There's some good comments, good links, good everything there. So that's just.
Or save it as a file.
Yeah, so you can save it as a file, yes. I use Word, but you can use WordPad. You can use a lot of things to do it. Okay, there's a couple of hands here real quick. Yeah, who's, okay.
Well, Art, I think Art beat me with the hand in the screen because I couldn't. I think you got me, Art, at the wire. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you, in the chat there, if you, on the far right-hand side, the three little dots there, if you click on that, you can click on Save Chat, and it'll save as a file without having to copy and paste.
Yep, there you go. And my question goes right along with that. Dan, is there any way of saving the participants? Because one of the reasons I sometimes type the call sign in the person in the chat window is because I want to save their call sign in the chat so I can save it to the file. So I'm actually using the chat window pretty much as like a notepad. So if I wanted to, like Art said, press the three little dots, I might put in there Art KM6RSY, press three little dots, and then I can save it. Is there any way to save the participants?
Not that I know of. I looked at that before, and I'll go back and look at it again. That's very valuable information for what we're doing here and for follow-up. So I will check again.
I was thinking that if everybody just, I know, Art, you know, if I just put down, if I just threw my call sign, let's see if that works here. If I just put my maybe 3MXM, enter, yep, it shows up. I hit the save button. Oh, yeah, there's one way to do it, but it's not easy. Okay, thanks, Dan.
Okay, super. Bob, you get your hand up?
Yeah, I'm sure you answered this question earlier, but I was in late. I misread the time. Unfortunately, I assume that the recording will be made available.
Yes, I'm recording it and I'll make it available to everybody.
All right, thank you very much.
Joe, you got your hand up?
Yeah, Dan, I just wanted to make one comment. We've been following what Oscar's been doing in LA for quite some time. About 6 months ago, he made some advances on templates.
Oliver, Oscar's the word.
Yeah, I meant Oliver. Yes, sorry. Yeah, we've been following it for quite a while, and he's been really quite a mentor for us, teaching us about the use of WinLink in digital modes for emergency communications. And I think for the first time we're seeing here an implementation where we're using digital communications to go from a person to a computer in a served agency. We can only do that with transport layers like WinLink. But I think all of the section managers and the SECs need to look at how in the 21st century we can make MCOM more relevant to our served agencies by undertaking or embracing the need to understand data processing as an extension of what we're doing. It's really quite fantastic what Oscar accomplished here with the earthquake thing. So I just wanted to comment and say that I think it affects the organizational structure of ARIES going forward.
I think you're 100% right, Joe. Really appreciate what's going on in the LAX, the Y area. It affects us all. Going forward, I hope to see a lot more activities and things of that nature. Joe, you still got, did you put your hand again or did I forget to lower it? Okay, any more questions out there? Okay. All righty, that being the case, I'm going to close this out and we'll, as soon as I get it all done, I'll get everybody a copy of both a visual, a view it, and a means of downloading this for those who want to do something once they look for people. Again, I appreciate everybody, what you've done, and for being here tonight. 73s.
73s.